In the recent Rasmussen poll, we're up 44 points with Trump at 57, Ron DeSanctimonious at 13, and the rest of them down in single digits, really low. And in the morning consult that just came out, I wanted to see, because, you know, every time you get indicted, I like to check the polls, because one more indictment that I think this election's over. One more. No, it's horrible. You get indicted for nothing. Can you imagine a guy? Let's indict my opponent. This becomes a third world country.
But then, when I signed the bipartisan infrastructure again, which...
This is my video update from Larnaca, Cyprus on this Wednesday morning, August the 16th. Let's talk about some news, and let me read you a tweet from Daniel Baldwin. He posted on the platform X, formerly known as Twitter, as the artist formerly known as Twitter. And he posted, President Trump told Americans to watch OANN in a tweet that, according to Fani Willis, was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Fani Willis is arguing it is an overt act of illegality to consume content not approved by GA election officials. Lunacy. Yeah. The whole thing is rigged and corrupt. That's for sure. And this is much bigger than Trump. This is much bigger than Trump, because if this indictment, this case goes through and something happens to Trump, well, then this is going to set the precedent for all future elections in the United States. So everything is at stake here with this Georgia indictment and the other 3 indictments and the possible new indictment that may be coming from Arizona. This is a tweet from The Real Fly. Arizona may press charges against Trump for election interference, according to Governor Hobbs. They just can't stop. The deep state, the Democrats, they can't stop. They know that this is going to damage the United States in a big way. Or maybe they don't know. Maybe they're so consumed with the lust, the desire for power, that they don't realize that this damages the United States. But it does. It does damage the United States. And with each indictment against Trump, Trump gets stronger and stronger, and the United States gets weaker and weaker. That is the irony to all of this, is that even Trump himself has come out with a statement and said, with each indictment, I go up in the polls. So he understands this. I believe the Democrats understand this as well. They must have consultants and pollsters and all kinds of people telling them that this is only going to help Trump's polling numbers and it's only going to strengthen Trump. But the powers that be, they can't help themselves. It's very much like Ukraine. It's actually exactly like Ukraine. They know they're losing the conflict in Ukraine. They know that with each escalation, the collective West gets weaker, Russia gets stronger, Ukraine gets closer to collapse, but they can't help themselves. As we in the Duran community say over and over again, there is no reverse gear with these guys. No reverse gear. So since we're on the topic of Ukraine, let's talk about what Jens Stoltenberg's chief of staff said the other day, according to a Norwegian newspaper called VG. NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg's chief of staff, Stan Jensen, said, and I quote, "I think that a solution could be for Ukraine to give up territory and get NATO membership in return." Jensen, according to Norway's VG newspaper. That's what he said. This discussion is already underway within NATO, he said, suggesting it could be a possible solution to the conflict. An interesting statement from Jens Stoltenberg's chief of staff, especially the part about this proposition of territory for NATO membership being discussed in NATO. So obviously this is something that the NATO member states are talking about, and they probably have been discussing it for a while, understanding that the big counteroffensive, the great big super duper uber counteroffensive has failed. They're now trying to find an off-ramp where they could probably declare some sort of victory. For example, they could say, okay, we gave up territory, but we got Ukraine into NATO, so this is a win. Finland, Sweden, and a chunk of Ukraine, whatever that part is going to be. It's in NATO now, so this is a win. It's a win for the Biden White House. It's a win for Ukraine. And it's an L for Russia because the only thing that Putin has done is he has made NATO bigger and stronger. That's their thinking in all of this. And so they're coming out with the idea, or they're talking about the idea of just accepting territorial loss in order for Ukraine membership. That's what NATO is kicking around. But, Ukraine is not, it looks like from the statements from Ukraine officials that they're not so hot on this idea. I imagine the neocons in the US, they're not going to want this because they want forever war and constant escalation. That's just the neocon way. And you have to ask Russia as well. Why would Russia agree to this when they are winning, and they are winning in a big way? And as Ukraine gets weaker and as the collective West gets weaker, Russia is getting stronger and stronger. And a big Russian offensive, at least a lot of experts and analysts are saying that a big Russian offensive could be in the works in the next month or two. Probably the next 2 months we could see a Russian offensive. And Russia is already getting close to capturing Kupiansk and erasing all the Ukrainian gains in the great big Kharkov counteroffensive. So that would be a huge blow to the Ukraine military. It would be a huge psychological blow to NATO. And this scheme, this idea that's being floated out there about territory for NATO membership, I don't think Russia would go for it. Actually, I'm pretty confident that Russia would say niet, because this whole conflict is about, most of it is about Ukraine entering NATO. So why would they accept Ukraine into NATO? That would signify a Russian capitulation. So I don't think Russia would go for it. Anyway, Zelensky's BFF, Mr. Podolyak, he said on Twitter, he wrote on Twitter, well, X, formerly known as Twitter, the artist, formerly known as Prince, may he rest in peace. Prince was awesome. Prince was absolutely awesome. Anyway, this is what Podolyak wrote on X. Trading territory for a NATO umbrella is ridiculous. If Putin does not suffer a crushing defeat, the political regime in Russia does not change, and war criminals are not punished, the war will definitely return with Russia's appetite for more. Now, the state intel guy, the number two to the artificial intelligence android robot known as Budanov, the number two guy in the intel, Mr. Danilov, he said that Kiev will never negotiate with Putin. None of Ukraine's Western backers are pushing for peace, and that Russia must be destroyed like a modern day Carthage. Interesting statement from Danilov. Unfortunately for Danilov, the trajectory looks like the collective West will be facing some sort of modern day Carthage outcome, not Russia. But that is the statement from Ukraine, from Podolyak, from Danilov. They did not take too kindly to Stoltenberg's chief of staff's statement. So that is the update with what is happening in Ukraine with this potential NATO peace proposal, which no one will accept, but the marketing officials, the script writers in NATO and the marketing officials in NATO probably like this Ukraine NATO for territory idea. They can spin this in a positive way, but I don't think they'll get the opportunity to do that. And one signal that Ukraine may be losing or may be out of the favor of the globalist elites is coming from the Open Society Foundation and George Soros, because we have news from documents obtained by Bloomberg and Reuters that the Open Society Foundation, George Soros, his son is either now operating it or will operate the Open Society Foundation. Either way, this foundation, bankrolled by George Soros, is looking to pull out of the European Union. It is done with the European Union, according to these documents, and it's going to focus its efforts on other parts of the world. Most likely, we're looking at Asia and a big focus on China. Now, George Soros, he despises China. He absolutely hates Xi Jinping, and he's been wanting to get at China and destroy China for a while now. So it looks like the younger Soros' son, what's his name? Alexander, I believe is his name. It looks like Alexander is going to try and accomplish what his father could not do, which is to destroy China. Soros to shut down most EU projects, according to Reuters. The liberal financier will shift his attention to other parts of the world, according to an internal memo. Now, he's not going to leave Europe completely. According to this memo, this document, Soros Foundation will continue to provide limited funds to Ukraine, Moldova, and the Western Balkans. But as far as the EU is concerned, it looks like the Soros Foundation is bolting, and that probably means that they don't see much of a future in the European Union. Perhaps it means that they see Project Ukraine and the EU as a lost cause, or it could mean, this is a different way to interpret this move from the Open Society Foundation. It could mean that they've captured all of the leadership in the European Union and in Europe in general as a whole. They've all been captured. They're all loyal to the globalist cause, that there's no need to invest in it anymore. They could be saying, we've got all these guys. They're not going anywhere. They're going to do whatever we tell them to do. So why invest money in the European Union anymore? Let's take our funds and divert them to Asia and to China, probably to Africa as well. And let's focus on those regions. So it could be a signal that the Soros Foundation sees Europe as collapsing and not worth it. It could mean that the Soros Foundation sees that Ukraine has lost the conflict, Europe, the EU has lost, and there's no need to invest good money after bad. Or it could mean that they've got Europe, the EU wrapped up anyway, so let's move on now. So that is the news from the Open Society Foundation. Let's see here. An Open Society Foundation spokesperson told Reuters that the NGO would continue to hand out some grants in Europe, including in Ukraine, Moldova, and the Western Balkans. These grants will be doled out to a national level foundations at a scale to be determined over the coming months. The spokesperson said, over the past 3 decades, the Open Society Foundation has spent over $19 billion on various projects, including $209 million in 2021 towards projects in Europe and the Central Asia region. So $209 million in 2021, 19 billion in total. That's a lot of money for a lot of regime changes. That is a lot of money that the Soros Foundation has spent. I think their total budget is something like 25 to 30 billion. That's the total amount of money that they're that they have to spend, or something like that, 35 billion. It's just a huge amount of money towards regime change, chaos, and war. So, staying on Asia, we have Putin, and a part of his speech yesterday at the Moscow Security Conference talked about Asia, and Putin actually said that NATO could be expanding into Asia. NATO could have expansion plans in Asia. According to Putin, the US is seeking to reformat interstate relations in the Asia Pacific, according to the Russian president. Speaking at the 21st International Security Conference in Moscow, the Russian leader said that the United States seeks, among other things, to reformat the system of interstate interaction that has developed in the Asia Pacific region. Putin added that calls to develop so-called Indo-Pacific strategies are essentially aimed at creating military political associations that are controlled by Washington. We do not rule out that things are leading to the full integration of NATO forces with structures created by the AUKUS bloc, Putin stressed, referring to the pact agreed in late 2021 between Washington, London, and Canberra. So, Putin is also hinting at a strategic shift in the collective West towards Asia. Much like Soros is shifting towards Asia, Putin is saying that NATO is going to now shift towards Asia as well. And what they're going to do is that they're going to use AUKUS, the creation of AUKUS, to merge it with NATO, and that's going to be NATO Pacific or NATO Asia. That's going to be NATO's expansion. And it makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. I can definitely see NATO merging into AUKUS. I can see an expansion into Asia as the collective West starts focusing in on China, because the time window to take on China and go to war with China is decreasing with each passing day. They understand that Project Ukraine is lost and they need some sort of off-ramp, which signifies some type of victory for NATO, hence the earlier segment where I talked about trading territory for NATO membership. So they need to wrap this up, present it as some sort of win, and then focus in on Asia and China ASAP. And so Putin is saying that this is the plan. NATO merging with AUKUS and NATO expansion into Asia. And, you know, NATO, for the organization, the alliance, to justify its existence and all the money that is sent to the alliance, it has to expand. If it stops expanding, then it has no purpose. Why should countries spend 2 or 3 or 4 or 5% of their budgets on NATO when the alliance has no purpose and is not expanding into new markets? Like any business, right? It has to expand into new markets. And once it's stopped at Ukraine, once Russia stops it at Ukraine, then NATO is stuck. Where else can it go? Finland, Sweden. Okay, maybe it gets Moldova, but, you know, so what? That's it. It has nowhere else to go. It's been stopped at Ukraine. There's no expansion further east into Eurasia, and it has to make a jump. And the natural jump is AUKUS and Asia and China. That's the natural jump for NATO. So this all makes perfect sense. I think the pieces are starting to come together. Maybe in 6 months to a year, I think everything will be in clearer in a clearer focus in about 6 months to a year. As Ukraine winds down, Asia is going to pick up. They have no reverse gear. That's for sure. So let's, what else do I have here? Let's talk about Germany bankrolling Ukraine's military for the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years going forward. We had the German finance minister, Mr. Christian Lindner, he made a super duper secret trip to Kiev, which was publicized for everyone to see. And he went to Kiev. This was his first trip since the beginning of the special military operation. And he met with Ukraine's finance minister. And during this trip, the German finance minister, he committed Germany to bankrolling Ukraine to the tune of 5 billion euros per year until at least 2027. Ukraine's finance minister Marchenko and Lindner signed a memorandum of cooperation between Kiev and Berlin aimed at boosting the Ukrainian budget in the next few years. The decision has yet to be approved by German parliament, but it will be approved. Lindner said Berlin will support Kiev as much as needed. The politician affirmed, adding that his country has already injected $22 billion in financial backing into Ukraine. $22 billion already invested by Germany into Ukraine, and another $5 billion up until 2027. Boy, Germany is really, really destroying itself on the hill that is known as Ukraine. They've made the decision to destroy their country for the sake of Ukraine. Unbelievable. Another 5 billion up until 2027. And let's do two more stories before we get to our clown worlds. And there are pictures now circulating of Challenger 2 tanks as well as Stryker armored vehicles in the Zaporozhye direction, possibly to be used for another assault on the village of Rabotino, which is not even on the first line of Russian defenses. Ukraine, for the past 3 months, they have been trying to make progress in Rabotino, and they have been suffering devastating losses with each attempt to try and take Rabotino. And it looks like they are now going to use Challenger tanks, Stryker armored vehicles, and these Challenger tanks are fitted with a type of cage. A kamikaze drone visor is covering these Challenger 2 tanks. Obviously, they are worried about Russia destroying these Challenger 2 tanks because we have many reports, unconfirmed reports, which claim that the British government gave orders to the Zelensky regime not to use the Challenger tanks in the first stages of the counteroffensive because they don't want those Challenger tanks to burn like the Leopard tanks burned, because that would be bad for business. That would be bad for the sale of Challenger tanks. But there are many analysts now who are saying that Ukraine has just decided, you know what? We have to send whatever vehicles and equipment we have left, whatever last reserves we have left, and we have to send them in the direction of Rabotino because we're running out. We're running low, and time is ticking. We have about 1 month left until the weather changes. And so there's no more options left than to send the Challenger 2 tanks in there, put a cage on top of them, send more Stryker armored vehicles, and call up whatever well-trained reserves we have left, and let's send them towards Rabotino so we can try to capture this village in the security zone in the gray area to show some progress for their NATO masters. So that is not a good sign for Ukraine. It's not going to be a good sign for the UK, for the British military industrial complex, because those Challenger 2 tanks are going to get destroyed and demolished, and we're going to have all kinds of videos of those Challenger 2 tanks getting destroyed, and most likely we're going to have those Challenger 2 tanks captured by the Russian military. And what is the Russian military going to do when they capture a couple of Challenger 2 tanks? Well, they're going to put those tanks in a new museum in Moscow, which is displaying Western weapons. That's right. There is a museum in Moscow, which is now home to all of the captured Western weapons, and citizens in Moscow and in Russia can go visit this museum and see all of those Leopard tanks. And soon they're going to see the Challenger tanks, and soon after that they'll be able to check out the Abrams tanks, and soon after that they may even be able to see a couple of F-16s as well. So that is the new museum that has opened up in Moscow. Bad sign that that Ukraine is digging into their Challenger tank stock, their Challenger tank inventory to send towards the Zaporozhye direction and towards Rabatino. It means that maybe Shoigu was right in his statement. I know that, you know, when Shoigu puts out a statement, you have to be very cautious about the statements he makes. But maybe he was right when he said yesterday that the Ukraine military is almost, he said, almost exhausted. So give it another month or two, and I'm sure the truth will come out. So let's do a clown world. And before I get to my clown world, let me show you an old picture. This is an old picture, an old photo, pre SMO, I believe, pre-conflict. And it is a photo with Tom Cruise in Kiev visiting then suited up Zelensky. And the tweet says, the highest paid actor in the world, and Tom Cruise. That photo never gets old. I love that photo, and I love that that headline, that tagline, whatever you call it, with the photo that accompanies the photo. The highest paid actor in the world, and Tom Cruise. Yeah, Tom Cruise isn't even close to the money that Zelensky makes. It's not even close. You can see Zelensky's laughing. He's like, yep, I'm going to get paid big money soon because this is all pre-SMO. Anyway, let's do a real clown world now. And we know who is running Biden's Twitter account and social media accounts. This has now been revealed. It is Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary. And she put out a tweet yesterday. I guess she was meaning for this tweet to go onto Biden's official Twitter account. And instead, she posted it on her Twitter account. And the tweet says, investing in America means investing in all of America. When I ran for president, I made a promise that I would leave no part of the country behind. I think this tweet has since been deleted, but now we know who is running Biden's Twitter account. It is Karine Jean-Pierre. Now, I don't know if this is an improvement for Biden or if this is a negative, to be quite honest. I think Biden would be better off running his own Twitter account than having Karine Jean-Pierre run it. But anyway, that is the clown world. That's all I've got. I think, one second, let me put up an image right here if I have it handy. And it's it's a meme that's going around from Not Jerome Powell Twitter account. It says a Netflix original series, Biden. And it has a picture of Karine Jean-Pierre. So she's the person behind the curtain. Oh, man. All right. That's the video, everybody. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, and Rockfin. And go to the Duran shop. Pick up a Duran Greek hat. Use the code Good Day. Get 10% off. Let's see. Who is about to visit Cyprus? I can't make it out. Oh, UPS. It's a UPS plane. Packages are being delivered, probably for for the Duran shop, orders, probably shirts and hats from people in Cyprus who are ordering Duran merch. All right, that's the video. Take care.